Hi, I'm Lori Rosakis. Welcome to Video Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series. This is the 9th program in the series, Improving Your Vocabulary. Let's start with an introduction. One great way to upgrade your writing is to upgrade your vocabulary. That's because the words that you choose help you communicate your meaning, and they help you write with style. You want to write clearly and you want to write directly. You want to use the words that suit your purpose and your audience. Those are not necessarily the longest words. Remember that words are the building blocks of thought. You want to learn as many words as you can so you have a wide variety of words to choose from. This will help you convey your meaning with clarity and with style. But there are some words that you want to avoid. First of all, you want to avoid slang and idiomatic expressions. These are informal phrases that don't really belong in academic writing. The problem with slang and the problem with idiomatic expressions is they're often not understood except in a very small group of people. So if somebody outside that group is reading your writing, they're not going to know what you mean. Second, slang and idiomatic expressions go out of fashion very quickly. So a phrase that sounds very fresh and new now is going to sound very stale and old in as short as 3 or 4 months. And you want your writing to have a little bit of lasting power. And finally, you run the risk of somebody not understanding what on earth you're saying. You might be misspelling it, might not have a standardized spelling, so you want to avoid these. Next, you want to avoid charged and biased language. These are words or phrases that might reinforce any negative prejudices or stereotypes. You can identify these words because when you write them or when you hear them or when you think about them, you're going to pause a second and wonder how they may be taken by your audience. If you're pausing, don't use the word, because then you know that your audience is apt to be offended or maybe just a bit put off. So you don't want to use any of those words as well. And last, you don't want to use jargon. Jargon is a vocabulary that's pertinent to a particular profession, field, or group. For example, there's medical jargon, there's law jargon, and so on. Medical jargon we call anatomy, things like that. Law jargon we sometimes call legalese. And those are words or phrases that other doctors or other lawyers might understand, but if your audience is not made up of those people, they're not going to understand what you're writing about. In academic writing, in the writing that you do in school and on standardized tests, you should use jargon only when you're absolutely sure that your readers will understand it without any explanation or any definition. To recap, avoid slang and idiomatic expressions because they're stale and not widely understood. Avoid charged or biased language because that will offend your readers. And avoid jargon, specialized terms, because the likelihood is that your audience will not understand what you're writing about. One final note about jargon. As you continue your education, when you go to college, if you go to grad school, you are, of course, going to learn the jargon of your specific field. So if you decide to become a lawyer or a doctor or a scientist, you're going to learn those specific words. Of course, at that point, you will use those words in your essays because your audience will expect you to use those words. But always define them to make sure, 100% sure, that your audience understands what you're writing about. But other than that, you have hundreds of thousands of words that you can choose from. Now, let's talk about some other ways that you can upgrade your vocabulary. First of all, you want to have fun learning words. You don't want to make it into drudgery. In addition, you want to learn denotations and connotations of words, and we'll talk about that in a moment. You want to learn roots, prefixes, and suffixes, those are word parts. And you want to learn words that have entered English from other languages. Let's start with having a little bit of fun. One of the most fun ways to learn words is to play word games. Another way is to read widely. In addition, you can learn word histories. Be very careful to pronounce your words correctly. You want to make and use word cards. You want to learn synonyms and antonyms. And you want to use dictionaries and thesauruses. Playing word games is very effective and a lot of fun. A great way to learn a lot of vocabulary. You can play traditional word games such as Scrabble or Boggle, or you can make up your own word games by yourself or with friends. There are many word games that you can find in daily newspapers, especially crossword puzzles, word finds, word scrambles, and jumbles. You can find them in daily newspapers, and you can find them in Saturday and Sunday editions of newspapers. There are many online as well. You can just Google or look up any kind of puzzle and find those, download them, and solve them. It's a very fun and very effective way to increase your vocabulary. Now, reading is one of the most effective ways to increase your vocabulary and also one of the most fun ways. You can read anything that you like. You can read fiction, novels and short stories. You can read nonfiction, essays, autobiographies, biographies. You can read magazines, newspapers. Try to get in the habit of reading a newspaper every day. You can read it in print or you can read it online, whatever's easier for you. You can read web pages. You can read a friend's blog. You can read poems. You can read plays. You can read technical material. In short, you can read anything that gives you pleasure as long as you read consistently. If you really want to improve your vocabulary, try to read about a half an hour a day, and then you'll see some real progress. But remember, have a dictionary on hand when you read so you can look up any unfamiliar words. You may also want to keep a little journal or log of new words that you learn. Write them down and then write down the definition. The act of writing them down helps you remember them. And that way you're also increasing your vocabulary in addition to using the reading. Now, when you read, sometimes you find words that you don't know. You can take out your dictionary and you can look them up. But you may not have your dictionary with you. You may be taking a standardized test. You may be reading a newspaper on the bus. So sometimes you can use context clues to figure out what an unfamiliar word means. The context is the surrounding words, the surrounding phrases. Authors very often put context clues in to make it easier for their readers to figure out the words. There are 6 different types of context clues that you can use. These tend to give away the meaning of the word. They are definition, restatement, contrast, cause and effect, example, style, and tone. Let's take a look at each one of these in detail. A definition clue actually has the definition right in the context. So you will actually find the answer in the sentence. Here's an example. She used a graduated cylinder, a tube-like container that allows one to measure the volume of a liquid. The unfamiliar word there is a graduated cylinder. You may know what graduated means, you may know what cylinder means, but you don't know what that means together. So the author has given you a context clue, which is an actual definition. A graduated cylinder is a tube-like container that allows one to measure the volume of a liquid. That definition clue can come before or after the unfamiliar word. So look in both places and see if the author has given you a definition clue. Sometimes the author will take that definition clue and put it in parentheses right after the word as well to make sure that you understand it. The second type of context clue is a restatement. With this type of context clue, the author includes a synonym. That's a word that means the same or almost the same as the unfamiliar word. It's similar to a definition clue, but it's a little bit less direct. So you've got to find that synonym and match it to the unfamiliar word. Here's an example. The two theories were mutually exclusive. They were conflicting and could not both be true. The unfamiliar phrase there is mutually exclusive. And the restatement synonym clue is conflicting and could not both be true. So you know that mutually exclusive is something that is conflicting and cannot both be true. So you found those synonyms and you matched them to the unfamiliar word or phrase. The third type of context clue is contrast. And in this case, the author includes an antonym, a word that is the opposite or nearly the opposite of the word that you don't know. Here's an example. Had Frank been a master painter, the finished portrait would have been beautiful. Unfortunately, it revealed that he was merely a dilettante. So now I don't know what that word dilettante means. I see unfortunately, which tells me I've got a contrast, I have the opposite. And the contrast clue I find is master painter. So whatever dilettante means, it has to be the opposite of a master painter. From that I can infer that a dilettante is somebody who dabbles in things, who doesn't master something fully. So Frank must be somebody who is a casual weekend painter, not someone who is an accomplished master painter. And my tip-off to the contrast clue was the word unfortunately, which told me that I had the opposite of dilettante. In addition, authors can use cause and effect. When the meaning of an unfamiliar word or phrase can be inferred because the context includes a cause and effect relationship between the two events. Remember that a cause is why something happens, and the effect is the result or what happens. Here's an example. The home team had vanquished their opponents earlier that day and celebrated long into the evening. Well, I don't know what vanquished means. I've not seen that word, but I know they celebrated. Well, if they celebrated, something caused them to be happy. Well, what would cause a home team to be happy must be a victory. So vanquished must be something having to do with the team achieving a victory. From that I can infer what happened is they won, and they won significantly over their opponents. So vanquish must mean to get rid of or to eliminate. Context clues can also be an example. If you don't know the unfamiliar word, you look for an example that illustrates its meaning, or an example of some other word or phrase that you know. For example, in that version of the software, you could tweak the basic features of the face. You could fine-tune the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, and make other minor adjustments. Well, you may not know what tweak means, or you may have sort of a general idea, but you might not be exactly sure. So you look for some context clues, and you find fine-tune, make minor adjustments. So you know that fine-tuning and making minor adjustments are examples of tweaking. Well, putting these clues together, therefore, tweaking must mean to do some kind of small change. And indeed, it does mean that. Put it back in the sentence to check your understanding. In that version of the software, you could make minor changes to the basic features of the face. You could fine-tune the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and make other minor adjustments. Makes perfect sense. You know that you're right. In addition, the style and the tone of a passage can help you figure out what unfamiliar words mean. That helps you infer or figure out things you may not know. Here's an example. Slowly, it dawned on the sisters that no one, not one living soul, had set foot within this ominous castle in hundreds of years. as they brushed aside the cobwebs, climbed the creaky staircases, and entered one dark room after another, the two girls felt like deep-sea explorers. The beam from their flashlight was like the spotlight of a plunging submarine, peering into the ocean's depths, shedding unwelcome light onto the unseen. Maybe they should have turned around after all. Well, I don't know what ominous means, but from that style and tone, I'm feeling a mood of menace, a mood of threat. I feel like something evil is about to happen. They're brushing aside cobwebs. They're climbing creaky staircases. They're entering one dark room after another. Maybe they should have turned around after all. It gives me the chills because there's something creepy about this. From all of those clues in the style and the tone, I can figure out that ominous must be an omen that something evil is about to happen. It must be a feeling of impending dread. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and use context to determine the meanings of the underlined words and phrases. Also, identify the kinds of context clues that helped you infer these meanings. Here are some answers. The teacher shot Brittany one of his famous withering glances. She froze in response and put her cell phone back into her jacket. I don't know what withering means. I can figure out that it must mean devastating or scornful because I've got a cause and effect clue there. If she froze in response and she put her cell phone back in the jacket, the teacher obviously is upset at her for taking out her cell phone or having her cell phone ring. So a withering glance must be disapproving, and so disapproving that she obviously froze and put away the cell phone. So withering is scornful. Withering is something that causes somebody to react in a strong and fearful manner. The chef seared the edges of the tuna steak. That is, he scorched them in a very hot pan. The unfamiliar word there is seared, which is a very specific cooking term. I can use a definition clue. I have the phrase, that is. That's my clue that there's going to be a definition to follow. That is, he scorched them. Well, seared must mean to scorch. And indeed it does. When you sear meat, you cook it on a very, very high heat. And the edges stay together. They sort of cook together and form a base on the meat. Number 3, far from a fortune, the salary they offered Dwayne was downright paltry. Well, paltry is the unfamiliar word here. I have a contrast clue. It's whatever paltry is, it has to be the opposite of a fortune. Well, a fortune is a lot of money. So paltry has to be a little bit of money, and indeed it is. It's a ridiculously small amount of money. Number 4, it seemed innocuous enough, just a harmless, friendly game of touch football at the family picnic. Innocuous means harmless. Well, that's easy. That's a restatement. It seemed innocuous, just a harmless game. Harmless is my restatement clue from innocuous. Number 5, Dr. Figueroa specializes in the evolutionary biology of South American rodents, from the pocket-sized guinea pig to the 140-pound capybara. I have never heard that term capybara. Well, what is it? It has to be some kind of South American rodent. An example of it, because the author has provided me 2 different examples. The first is the pocket-sized guinea pig. The other example is this 140-pound rodent. So I'm using the example clue to figure out what this rodent must be, which I really wouldn't want to meet. Number 6, R. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was incensed. I've got style and tone here. I've got R. I just couldn't take it anymore with my exclamation. That tells me that the writer is very angry and very upset. From the anger and the upset, I can figure out that incensed must be furiously angry. And indeed it is. As you read, use context clues to help you figure out the words that you may not know. You can always go back and check your answers in a dictionary, but the act of trying to figure out the context clues will also make you a better reader. In addition, you can learn word histories. Words, like people, often have interesting pasts. And knowing the history or the origin of a word, its etymology as we call it, can help you remember the word and can help you make it a part of your own writing. How do you find a word history? Well, you can look up the histories on the web, or you can look them up in books, because there are many books about word histories. Once you find the history of a word, or many words, group them together, and that'll make it much easier for you to remember them. For example, we have words from people's names, we have words from ancient Greek and Roman myths, we have words that come from places, from clothing, from colors, from foods. For example, from people's names, we have America, we have sandwich, we have mesmerize. The word sandwich is particularly interesting, that word history. The Earl of Sandwich, that was a place in England, was apparently quite a gamer, and he didn't want to leave the gaming tables long enough to eat dinner. So he asked his butler to take 2 slabs of bread, put some meat in between, and give it to him. The butler did, and that came to be known as the sandwich. We also have words from Greek and Roman myths and legends. Adonis, Herculean. An Adonis is a very handsome man, because Adonis was very handsome. Hercules was tremendously strong. And from Hercules, we formed an adjective, Herculean, which means tremendously strong. We also have words that come from places. For example, tuxedo, denim, bialy. The word denim, for the cloth that's used in clothing, comes from a town in France, de Nîmes, of the town of Nîmes. And so denim, de Nîmes, became known as the cloth. The tuxedo came from a place in Upper New York State, Tuxedo Park, where a gentleman decided to cut the tails off his coat, his very formal coat, and make a short jacket, and that came to be known as the tuxedo. The bialy came from a town where these particular kinds of onion rolls were made. We also invented words from clothing. Bloomers, you may have heard, or Wellingtons. Bloomers came from a woman named Bloomer, who had created these pants for women to wear. At that time, women were not allowed to wear pants. Wellingtons are a type of boot. They're a one-piece rubber boot. They come up to your knees. Also came from the person who invented these boots. They were worn, and the word became part of our language. We have words from colors, chartreuse and indigo. They also have histories. And we have words about food. For example, Cajun and vichyssoise. Vichyssoise is a cold potato and leek soup. I won't spoil your fun. I'll let you look up some of these words as well. When you have a chance, look up Cajun, look up vichyssoise, look up chartreuse, look up indigo, and you'll find they have absolutely fascinating histories. Here's one of my personal favorites. You may have heard the phrase a toady, that someone is a toady. Well, in the 1600s, people mistakenly believed that toads were poisonous, and that anybody who ate a toad's leg rather than a frog's leg would die a miserable death. So rather than not eat frog's legs, because people weren't willing to give up frog's legs, they tried to find a cure for this so-called fatal poisoning. Quack healers A quack healer is a fake healer, someone who doesn't have any medical training but pretends to do so. So quack healers would perform in public, and they would sometimes hire an accomplice to eat a toad. The quack healer would then whip out his cure and save his helper's life. The helpers, the people who ate the toads, came to be called toad eaters. Makes perfect sense. Since anyone who would eat anything as disgusting as a toad had to be completely under his master's thumb, toad eaters, or toadies, became the term for any bootlicking, fawning flatterer. So anyone who really overly praises somebody else, today we call a toady. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and use a dictionary or an online resource to find the history of these 8 words. Also, learn their meanings. Then come back. Here are the answers. Mentor comes from mentor, who was Odysseus' friend and his son Telemachus' tutor in the Odyssey. The term now means a trusted teacher or guide. And the reason was that mentor was indeed a trusted teacher and guide to Odysseus and to his son. The word has a very good connotation, which we'll learn about in a few moments, because we associate it with someone we can trust and someone who's very wise. Quisling is rather the opposite. That word has a very bad overtone to it. It comes from Vidkun Quisling, who lived from 1887 to 1945. He was a Norwegian army officer who collaborated with the Nazis. The term, of course, now means a traitor, someone who betrays his country. And to call someone a Quisling is a very bad thing to do, because the term has such a bad use to it, a bad meaning to it. A thespian, you may have heard, is an actor. It comes from the Greek poet, actor Thespis, who lived around 534 BC. And from his name, we took the term thespian. Quixotic is one of my favorite words. I love the sound, I love the use. It comes from a book called Don Quixote, which was published in 1605. In the book, the hero, Don Quixote, is very chivalric and very impractical. He dreams of saving damsels in distress, and he dreams of doing wonderful things. He ends up tilting at windmills. And we use the term quixotic today to mean someone who has lofty but very impractical sentiments, a dreamer. Sideburns, those things that men like to grow, comes from a 19th century U.S. Army general whose name was Ambrose Burnside. We took Burnside, we flipped it into sideburns. And as you would expect, General Burnside had huge, bushy sideburns. Dahlia is a very delicate flower. It's named after Anders Dahl, the Swedish botanist who discovered it in Mexico around the turn of the 19th century. You'll find quite a few words are named after people who discovered them. Pasteurize comes from Louis Pasteur. He was the French scientist who discovered that applying controlled heat could kill most of the microorganisms in certain foods and beverages. And as you probably know, all of our milk is pasteurized, and then some of it is, of course, homogenized. But when we pasteurize it, we cook it a certain amount to remove the harmful germs. Nicotine, it's an addictive drug found in tobacco plants, comes from Jean Nicot, the 16th century French ambassador to Portugal, who introduced the tobacco plant to France. And from his name, Nicot, we developed the word nicotine. And one of the hardest things about learning words is learning to pronounce them correctly. And this happens when somebody, and I'm a case in point, reads very widely and has a very wide reading vocabulary, but may not have the occasion to use those words in speech. So I use my words very often when I'm writing, but I very rarely have a conversation with a lot of these words because words like quixotic, which I love, it doesn't really come up that much in conversation. I can't say to people, boy, you're really quixotic. So I may not be pronouncing it correctly because I may never have heard it ever used. Sometimes you misuse the word because you've never heard it pronounced, so you're mispronouncing it yourself. And in that case, what you've got to do is get the correct pronunciation. Because if you can't say them correctly, you're less likely to use them, and when you do use them, you're less likely to use them correctly. Use a dictionary to learn how to pronounce words correctly. What's nice now is there's a lot of online dictionaries that have audio clips, so you can hear the actual proper pronunciation of the word. Because sometimes when you look at the diacritical marks in the dictionary, you're not 100% sure how to say it still. So try one of those online programs if you're having some difficulty. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and get a dictionary to find out how to pronounce each of these 10 words. Also, learn their meanings. Then come back. The first one is Amish. They are a group of Mennonite farmers who live in various places around the country, primarily in the Pennsylvania area. And that first, the A, is not Amish, it's Amish. Number 2, it looks like 2P, but it's really toupee because it comes from the French. A toupee is a man's hairpiece designed to cover up baldness. Number 3 is also French, and it's pronounced dénouement. It's a French pronunciation, dénouement. And that is the end part of a plot when the action is resolved. Awry, like awry, is when something doesn't go quite as we planned. It goes a little bit off course. Aplomb is to deal with things with dignity without losing your composure. Number 6, a syllogism is a type of logical argument. Nuclear can refer to united families. It can refer to atomic weapons. It refers to atomic power as well. Eccentricity. I love that word. I love the sound of that word. Eccentricity is a sort of cool way of saying that somebody is a little bit odd and strange. It sounds better than saying you're really weird. You can say you're sort of eccentric, or you have many eccentricities. Omnipotent means all-powerful, and you can figure that one out by taking a look at its parts. Omni means all, potent means power, so omnipotent means all-powerful. And chaos, which is often misspelled with a K, means utter and complete disarray. If something is in chaos, it is completely ill-arranged. It has totally fallen apart. In addition, you can learn synonyms and antonyms for words. This is a great way to greatly enlarge your vocabulary. But even more important than learning more synonyms and antonyms, when you know them, you can express yourself with greater clarity and greater precision. And that's what really matters. So you use exactly the word that you want. Synonyms, as we mentioned earlier, are words that mean the same, synonym, same, or nearly the same as other words. Antonyms are words that mean the opposite or nearly the opposite of other words. One of the greatest strengths of English is that we have so many synonyms and antonyms, and that allows us to get precisely the shade of meaning that we want so we can convey exactly what we mean. This is especially important when you're doing electronic communication, because as I'm speaking to you now, in addition to my words, you have my expressions, you have my gestures, you have my body language, and you can figure out what I mean. But when you're keyboarding something in cyberspace, you may be misunderstood if you're using a word with a slightly different shade of meaning than the one that you want. So if you don't have that precise synonym, your reader may misunderstand your message, and you won't communicate clearly. So you want to be able to have a lot of synonyms and a lot of antonyms at your disposal. There are books of synonyms and antonyms that you can get, and there are online programs built into your computer that have synonyms and antonyms. But if you use one of those programs, or if you use one of those books, don't just click on the word that you think sounds good. Make sure that you look up the word in the dictionary and you understand exactly what its shade of meaning is. Because just because it sounds good and it fits with the other words doesn't mean that it conveys the exact meaning that you want. Many of my students just look for synonyms and antonyms because they want their writing to sound interesting, but in effect, what they're doing is they're not communicating their message clearly. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and write at least one synonym and one antonym for each word. I know you can get more than one for each because each of these has a lot of synonyms and antonyms. If you have a chance, try to figure out their shades of meaning as well, and then come back. Recall that I had said that it's important to have a lot of synonyms and antonyms so you can express your exact shade of meaning. Also be very careful, don't just choose the longest one or the one that sounds the fanciest. Just because a word is long, as we said earlier in this program, doesn't mean it's the correct word in that instance for you to express your ideas. It may be the correct word, but it may not be. So always check the meaning and check the context. Now here are my answers. They may be different from your answers. Relinquish means to quit, to renounce, to give up, to back off. The opposite is to keep, to perpetuate, perhaps to embrace. Authentic means real, it means genuine, it means legitimate. Now, let's take a quick look at that. Authentic, real, genuine, and legitimate. They're pretty close, but they do have slightly different shades of meaning. We use genuine, not legitimate, when we talk about gemstones, for example. So it would sound weird if you say, I have a legitimate diamond, rather than saying, I have a genuine diamond. The opposite of authentic is bogus. Bogus means fake or counterfeit. But even there, the words have shades of meaning. We tend to say counterfeit money. It's a term that we use to mean it's money that has been deliberately created to fool people. We don't say bogus money as often as we say counterfeit money. Slightly different shade of meaning. Chronic means habitual, it means ongoing. Like you would say, I have a chronic backache. It does not end. The opposite is single or short term. Let's take a look at naive. Naive means innocent, ingenuous. You could also say ignorant. It means that you're not exposed to the world, that you haven't had much experience. Now, being innocent is positive, but being ignorant is negative. And they both have the same dictionary kind of meaning, but that's when you want to be very careful which synonym you use. The opposite of naive is urbane or suave. And both of those words are sort of good words to be called because they imply that you are sophisticated, which could also be the opposite of naive. Sullen means morose and irritable and cranky and fretful. The opposite of that is blithe, cheerful, joyful. So now I have found synonyms and antonyms that have basically the same meaning but slightly different shades. Number 6, frigid means cold and freezing. The opposite could be hot, blistering. Impetuous means impulsive or rash. You act without thinking. The opposite is you're cautious, you're thoughtful, maybe you're calm. Loquacious, another one of my favorite words. Loquacious has a great root to it, loque, which means to talk. It means talkative, it means chatty. You could even use eloquent, which means the ability to speak smoothly. The opposite is taciturn, laconic, which means that you don't say very much at all, just maybe yep and nope. Terse. If someone is terse, they are concise, they are succinct. The opposite is they're verbose. They talk a lot, they're very long-winded, they never shut up. Hackneyed, another great word because it has such a good sound. Hackneyed means cliched or overdone or stale. It's a phrase like sweet as sugar or raining cats and dogs that has lost its freshness. The opposite of that would be fresh, new, or novel. So what you want to do when you find synonyms and antonyms is look at the widest possible list. Choose the ones that you think best fit your audience, your purpose, and your context, and then check their meaning in a dictionary to make sure that you've got exactly the word that you need. You want to be very careful not just to pick the longest word because you think it's going to impress your readers. Now, how can you remember all of these words that you've read about, that you've looked up in a dictionary, that you've read online? I mean, how can you possibly use them, remember them? Well, one of the best ways is to make a set of word cards. Choose maybe 10 words per week and take 3x5 index cards. Write the new word on the front, and on the back, write the word's meaning and write a sentence that uses the word so you know what part of speech it is. Keep the cards with you and study them whenever you have a few moments. You could study them at the kitchen table during breakfast. You could study them when you take the bus to school. You could study them when you're waiting online at the bank or in the dentist office. Just take them out and just read them over for maybe a minute or two at a time. Because if you don't use the words, you're going to lose them. When I was in school, I took French, German, and Spanish. And at one time, I was pretty good in my French and my Spanish, but I never used it because I haven't had an occasion to speak to people daily in French, Spanish, and German. So I've lost a lot of my language, and I'm sad about that because I wish I had kept it. If you want to retain your new vocabulary, you've got to keep using it. You've got to use it perhaps when you speak to people. You've got to use it in your writing. And if you don't have those opportunities, the word cards are a great way to help you remember those words and make them part of your everyday vocabulary. As you learn those 10 words, make 10 new cards and rotate the cards frequently so you review the old words and you use the new words. You don't want to be walking around, with 200 cards. So pick 10, pick 15, and keep those in your pocket. And you'll find that the words will stay with you longer because of repetition. So what I would like you to do now is to pause the program and make word cards for each of these useful words. Remember, you're going to write the word on the front, you're going to write the definition on the back, and then a sentence that uses the word. Use the cards to learn the words. I'm going to pronounce the words for you so I know that you know how to say them. Gaudy, vicarious, prosaic, imminent, icon, somber, ominous, latent, disheveled, inclement, quarry, audacious, vernacular, vivacious, and baffling. Here's one more clue. It might be easier for you to remember the words if you take your cards and you arrange them in some way that seems logical for you. For example, you can group them by parts of speech, you can group them alphabetically, you can group them by sound, anything that seems logical to you, maybe by length, put the longer words together, put the shorter words together, so that there's some pattern in your mind that helps make it easier for you to remember the words. Now, we've mentioned using a dictionary and a thesaurus a great deal in this program. I know that looking up words is a nuisance. Well, so is exercise, but they both work really well. And now, actually, you don't have a whole lot of excuses because you can look up the words online, you can look up the words in a book, they have little pocket programs that you can use. But the dictionary really is your best friend when it comes to knowing how to pronounce a word, how to use the word's origin, the word's part of speech, synonyms and antonyms for the word. And the act of looking it up, just looking up the word, helps you remember it because you've used it to look it up. There are many different kinds of dictionaries. For example, we have abridged and unabridged. An abridged dictionary is a shortened dictionary. An unabridged dictionary is the complete dictionary. You may never have seen an unabridged dictionary. It looks like a set of encyclopedias because an unabridged dictionary has many, many words. Many of them have all the words that we use. The abridged dictionaries are the ones that you find on your computer programs. They're the ones that you find in your little pocket dictionaries or in your pocket computer programs. And those are perfectly fine for everyday use. We also have specialized dictionaries. We have dictionaries of foreign phrases. We have dictionaries of regional phrases because in different parts of the country we use different words. For example, in some parts of the country we refer to that fizzy drink as soda, but in other parts of the country it's called pop. For example, in some parts of the country, those long sandwiches that are prepared on big, thick rolls are called heroes. In other parts, they're called hoagies. In other parts, they're called subs. In other parts, they're called grinders. So you may not be familiar with these regionalisms. Now, you're not going to use these in your writing because remember, we said you're going to stay away from slang and things like that. But you do want to know those terms because you want to understand if somebody says, I want a grinder and a pop, and you're used to saying, I want a soda and a hero, what it is the person is talking about. So you might want to consult a dictionary of regional English for those words and phrases. And you'll find there are dictionaries on many, many, many different types of words. There are dictionaries on words that have entered English from other languages. There are even pretend dictionaries. There's a dictionary of Klingonisms from Star Trek. Now, you're not going to consult that dictionary, but be aware that you can find a dictionary for just about any word that you want. In addition, we have a thesaurus. Now, a thesaurus is a collection of synonyms and antonyms. You can get that in a book or you can get that online. And as we mentioned earlier, that's in your program already, most likely. You use a thesaurus by looking up the word and you'll find the list of synonyms and you'll find the list of antonyms. But as I've said before, it's worth saying again, don't just look in the thesaurus or push the button and pick the longest word or the fanciest sounding word. Make sure that that word means exactly what you need it to mean. Because synonym can mean the same or almost the same. And as Mark Twain said, the difference between the word and its first cousin can be the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. A big difference. In addition, every single word in English has a denotation. A denotation starts with D, is its dictionary meaning. That's the word. When you look it up, you find exactly what the meaning is. You may find one meaning, you may find multiple meanings. So a word can have one denotation, two denotations, three, and so on. They are listed in order from most common, that's number one, to least common. However, some words also have a connotation. A connotation is the word's unstated meaning. It's its emotional overtones. It's what we think of when we hear the word. And the connotation can be negative or it can be positive. This is especially difficult for people whose native language is not English, because if they don't understand the word has a connotation, they may use it inappropriately in context. Also, the connotations may change, because as the word is used differently, it gets different connotations. Knowing a difference in connotation helps you get exactly the meaning that you need, and also helps you avoid being embarrassed. And you want to make sure that you use the word correctly. Here are some examples. The word thin. Synonyms include lean, slender, trim, skinny, lanky, scrawny, gaunt, emaciated, frail, skeletal, bony, underweight, malnourished, and anorexic. Thin may or may not have a connotation depending on who you talk to, but you know that slender has a positive connotation. When you hear the word slender, you think that's a good thing. But when you hear the words emaciated, frail, skeletal, bony, malnourished, they all have negative connotations. You don't want to say to somebody, boy, you are really emaciated. Yes, it means thin, but it means they are so thin that they are almost skeletal. Here's the opposite. Take the word fat. Hearty, robust, curvy, curvaceous. They all have positive connotations. If somebody says he's hearty looking, that's a good thing. But you don't want to be called chunky, heavy, overweight, or obese. They have negative connotations. So be aware that a synonym and an antonym may be neutral, but it may also be positive or negative. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and determine the connotation of each word in each pair. Put a plus for a positive connotation and a dash, a negative sign, for a negative one. Then come back. Now, I'm sure what you figured out is in each pair, the denotations, the dictionary meanings, are virtually identical, but the connotations are worlds apart. A know-it-all is a negative connotation. It implies someone who's a blowhard, someone who is always sharing knowledge that nobody particularly wants to know. So that's got a negative sign. But a sage also means a very wise person, but that has a positive connotation. We think of a wise person who is a good teacher and someone we want to go to. Thrifty and cheap both mean someone who is careful with their money, but thrifty is positive. Cheap is negative. Vain and confident, similar or identical denotations, but opposite connotations. To be vain is negative. To be confident is positive. You'd much rather be described as confident than vain. Bold and reckless. Someone who is bold goes out there, has got spirit, has got spunk. We think, an explorer, Eric the Red, positive. Someone who's reckless, we think someone is a daredevil. We think someone is careless. Completely negative. If you're steadfast, that means that you have the faith of your convictions. You take a stand and you don't deviate from it because you know you're right. It's a positive thing. But obstinate is the opposite. It means you dig your heels in and you get stubborn and you get petulant. Simplistic and uncomplicated are the same. Something simplistic is negative. Something uncomplicated is positive because it implies that it's easy. Now, as I said earlier, the denotations and the connotations of a word can change over time. For example, take terrific and awesome. They used to have negative, almost fearful connotations. Awesome meant full of awe, and that was a fearful thing. You would be afraid. Now, both of those words have highly positive connotations. It's terrific means it's great. It's awesome means it's great. Whereas many years ago, those were negative words. So as we can tell, a word's connotation can change. And words that have virtually identical denotations, dictionary meanings, can have wildly opposite connotations. So what this means is that you've got to look up the words in a dictionary to make sure that you're getting exactly the connotation as well as the denotation that you need. Now, another great way to learn words is to take them apart. I did that earlier when I took apart a word I showed you, omni and potent. Omni, all, potent is powerful. Many, many, many words can be taken apart into their affixes, their roots, their suffixes, and their prefixes. Let's take a look at the base form of the word. That's the root of a word. What's really nice about this is if you learn just a couple of roots, you'll find that you learn many, many words. As I had showed you with locu, elocution, loquacious, you learn locu, suddenly I've got two words out of one root. Now, some roots can also function as words. For example, graph is a root, but it's also a word. Term is a root, but it's also a word. Pater is a root, it's a word. So you can use them as words, or you can use them to build words. Others, as we said, you have to build with. So, for example, prim, P-R-I-M, you have to build on. You have to add, let's say, al, add the suffix. You get primal, which means first. Well, as you probably know, English has words from many other languages. Many of our words come from ancient Greece. And so by learning some Greek roots, you learn a lot of English words. Here are a couple of Greek roots that are especially useful. The first one is andr, A-N-D-R. It means man. For example, androgen, which is the male hormone. So we've combined A-N-D-R with O-G-E-N to form that word. Arch, which means first. We have the archbishop. He is the first or the highest bishop. Gen, which means race or birth, as in genetic, means pertaining to genes. Geo means earth, as in geography, mapping the earth. Helio means sun, as in heliocentric, the sun at the center of our solar system. Meter is measure, and altimeter is a device that measures altitude. Polit, P-O-L-I-T, citizen. Cosmopolitan means worldly. Thermo, heat. Thermostat is a device for regulating temperature. Zoo means animal. Zoology is the study of animals. Now, before we go on, these roots are tremendously useful, but not in 100% of the cases, because we've taken roots from other languages that are very, very similar. So, for example, we have gen, which as a Greek root means race or birth. But in the word genuflect, it doesn't have the same meaning because it has a different origin. So in that case, you might try it, but if you're not sure, you would look it up in a dictionary and you'd find it's a Latin root. And it means to bend from the knee. So if it doesn't make sense, if you've used your root, you've figured it out, and you say to yourself, you know, it still doesn't seem to be right because I've used my context clues. Something's got to be wrong here. Don't take this as infallible. Check it in a dictionary to make sure that it really works. Again, one more time. Use your roots, figure it out, check it in context, and if it seems illogical, check it in a dictionary. Now we've got some Latin roots. Vor means to eat, to consume. A carnivore is a meat eater. Carn, C-A-R-N or carne, is meat. Dict is to say, as in dictate, which is an authoritative command. Duct means to lead. Something that is ductile is easily molded. It can be easily led. Fact means to make. A factory is a place where things are made. Grad is go or step. So to degrade is to go down or to corrupt something. Ject is to throw. To reject is to throw aside. To eject, for example, is to throw out. Pel or pulls is to move. To impel is to urge. Now take a look again at pel and pulls. I put that one here on purpose because you'll see there are two different spellings for the same root. A lot of the roots have slight variations in spelling. So if you see a slight variation, it looks a little bit familiar. See if you can figure it out from the variation. And that's, of course, because language has changed over the years. If it makes sense, you're probably all right. If it doesn't make sense, check the word in a dictionary or use your context clues again. The prefix is a letter or a group of letters that goes at the beginning of a word to change its meaning. And the word prefix itself has a prefix. If you look at the word pre, it means before. So you can remember that a prefix goes before because pre means before. Learning just a few prefixes can give you many, many, many more words, same as you learned with roots, because you can decode these words by figuring out what the prefix is. So now you know roots and you learn prefixes, soon you'll learn the suffixes as well. Just as with roots, some prefixes are words all by themselves. For example, super is a prefix, but it can also be a word. Some words have more than one prefix. For example, reinvigorate. Re is a prefix. In is a prefix. So I've got two prefixes in that word. Just a note on prefixes. When you are using these words to upgrade your writing, a word that has a prefix, you do not add or subtract any letters. So if a prefix is added to a word, it is added and the spelling does not change. So remember that, because sometimes they look a little bit odd, but that's how they are. Here's some examples. A means not. Atypical is not typical. Anti means against. Antipathy is hatred. It's a feeling against. Aster or astro means star, as in asteroid. It's a star-like body. And that's one that has two slightly different ways to spell it, two slightly different variations. Auto is self, and automobile is a self-moving vehicle. Poly means many. Polychromatic means many colors. Knowing Latin and Greek prefixes for numbers can help you figure out a tremendous number of words. So these are extremely useful prefixes. Now, uni and mono both mean one. A unicorn and a monocle both use these prefixes. A unicorn is a make-believe, a mythological creature that has one horn. And a unicorn is the one-horn creature. A monocle is a single eyeglass. You sort of stick it right in your eye socket, and it has a string or it has a little stick that holds it on. Bi and di both mean two. Bicycle is a vehicle that has two wheels, bicycle. Dioxide is a molecule that has two oxygen atoms. Tri means three. Trimester is 1/3 of a year. Quad, quart, quater, and tetra all mean four. Quadrilateral is a four-sided shape. Quarter is 1/4 of something. A quatrain is 4 lines of poetry. And a tetrahedron is a 4-sided solid. Quint and penta both mean 5. So quintuplets are 5 babies that are born at the same time. Pentameter is a meter with 5 beats. Hexa or sext means 6. A hexapod is a 6-footed, like an insect that would have 6 feet. Sextet, a group of 6. Hepta, sept, means 7. Heptagon is a 7-sided figure. September is the 7th month. Now, if you do your math, you know September is not really the 7th month, but originally September was, so that makes sense. Oct means 8. An octave is 8 musical notes. Nov means 9. November was originally the 9th month of the year. Deca means 10. Decathlon is a competition with 10 parts. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and fill in the blanks in each sentence with the appropriate word using what you've learned about prefixes and roots. Then come back. These have circum for around and poly for many. Jacqueline used the formula to determine the distance around the circle. The circumference was 1 meter. Circumference is the distance around the circle. The madrigal was polyphonic. Instead of singing in unison, each singer sang a different melody at the same time. Magellan's voyage is generally credited with being the first successful attempt to circumnavigate the Earth. That shape has 16 sides of equal length. The more sides a polygon has, the closer it can come to looking like a circle. The mayor talked around every question he was asked. He was a true master of the art of circumlocution. The 3 tribes on the island worship similar gods. Their polytheistic beliefs may seem similar, but their ceremonies reveal that they practice vastly different religions. When a square sits inside a circle, the circle is said to circumscribe the square. The ambassador is a true polyglot. Her multilingual abilities enable her to communicate easily with many foreign leaders. Lisa is circumspect about material that she reads online, and teachers respect her cautious approach. Now we come to suffixes. A suffix is the letter or group of letters added to the end of a word to change its meaning, its part of speech, or its tense. Now, this is a big difference because prefixes only changed meaning. Suffixes can change meaning, part of speech, and tense. Here's an example of meaning. Kitchen to kitchenette. When you add the suffix ette, which means diminutive or smaller, a kitchenette is smaller than a kitchen. Cigar to cigarette. A cigarette is smaller than a cigar. Suffixes can also change part of speech. For example, risk to risky. Risk can be a noun or a verb. Risky is an adjective. And finally, tense. Remember, tense is time, past, present, future. Live to lived. Fasten to fastened. So I'm changing from the present to the past. Now, as with roots and prefixes, learning just a few suffixes can help you define and use correctly many, many words. Just a quick note about suffixes. When I mentioned prefixes earlier in the program, I told you when a prefix is added, no letters are dropped and no letters are added. That is not true with suffixes. Suffixes very often change the spelling of a word. The examples that I have here, I'm not adding or subtracting letters in this particular examples, but many other words do. So be sure to check the spelling just to make sure that you're correct when you're using these words in your writing. Here are some commonly used suffixes. State of being for nouns. ION, suggestion. ANCE, appearance. ENCE, as in independence. Ment, MENT, as in encouragement. CY, as in infancy. DOM, as in freedom. Hood, as in fatherhood. Mony, as in matrimony, for example. NOMY, autonomy. NESS, lightness. ISM, as in gigantism. TY, as in novelty. AGE, as in wreckage. SHIP, as in citizenship. And URE, as in culture. Now, before I go on, just a quick note. In a dictionary, you will often see these suffixes, or always see these suffixes, written with a little dash before them. That's the way they're written, but when they're added to words, that dash does not appear. You do not see that in the word. You may see a prefix that is separated from the word with that little hyphen, that little dash, but you will not see it with a suffix. So don't be confused when you see it in a dictionary with the dash before it. We also have suffixes for state of being. For example, ANT, as in petulant, or ENT, as in resplendent. We have suffixes that show how something is similar to, resembling, characterized by, or full of. These are used for adjectives and adverbs. Y, for example, full of cheer, you might say cheery. IC, metallic. Now, let's say nature becomes natural. AN, suburban. OUS, fame would become famous. Ish, child would become childish. ESQUE, esque, picture, picturesque. ILE, infant to infantile. INE, you might have masculine. IVE, you could take progress, make progressive. Full, wonder, full, full of wonder. EN, wooden. LY, yearly, take year, add LY. Some, trouble, some. Oid, android. And wise, as in likewise. We have suffixes that mean able to, or tending to, or capable of, worthy of, or fit for. These are adjectives and adverbs. For example, able and able. Laudable is the able. Sensible is the able. Watch these carefully, folks, because the ables and the ibles are very, very frequently misspelled. So check these in a dictionary or run a spell check when you use them in your writing. And we have make or do. It's a verb. Ate, as in alienate, to make foreign. Moisten, to make wet. Ite, ignite, to set on fire. Eyes, advertise. And IZE, idolize. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and complete each word using what you learned about suffixes and match the word to its definition. Then come back. Superficiality ends in ITY, and it means the state of being superficial or shallow. International ends with AL, and it means between or among nations. Between is two things, among is three or more things. Antecedent ends in ENT. It's the thing that came before. Disambiguation ends in ion, means something that eliminates confusion. Incessant ends in ant, and it means continuing without stopping. I chose these words very carefully. Just real quick, go back to the first one. Superficiality, you see super there. International, you see national there. Antecedent, you may have recognized that one. Dis, you probably recognized the dis. So you can use what you've learned, put it all together, use the roots, use the suffixes, and use the prefixes as you're doing your definitions. Now, English is very open to accepting new words. We're one of those languages that we welcome many new words to our shores. We invent new words, we use others' words. And one of the best ways to upgrade your vocabulary is by learning a word's origins. Because if you know where a word comes from, you can link it to other similar words. In addition, you can learn how to pronounce the word because you learn that there are spelling patterns that are very common, like bon mot from the French. And you learn those spelling patterns and those pronunciations, and that helps you to use that word correctly. Earlier, remember, we did denouement, and you learned that that has a certain sound because that comes from French. For example, we took a lot of words for cooking and music and dance from French, from Spanish, from Italian. We took cuisine, soufflé, and omelette from the French. We took taco, burrito, and enchilada from the Spanish. We took cappuccino, lasagna, and biscotti from the Italian. And you know as well as I do that we're just scratching the surface when it comes to words that come from cooking. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to jot down any unfamiliar words that you hear or read. Then look up the word's meaning in the dictionary. And as you get the meaning, also check the origin. Then take the words and group them together. For example, put all the words from French together. This will make you see how the words are similar, and then you'll understand the pronunciations and the spelling patterns much better. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and match each word that entered English from French to its definition, and then come back. We said these words are all from the French. A bon mot, and it has a French pronunciation, means a clever saying. Bon in French means good. Mot means word. So literally that means good word. It's a clever saying. Bourgeoisie is middle class. A charlatan is a faker or a quack. Faux pas is a social blunder. Pas in French means step, and faux means fake. So it's a fake step or a social blunder. Gauche means socially inept. Genteel means elegant and refined. Nonchalance means indifference. Rapport is harmony or accord. Repartee is witty talk, and a raconteur is an expert storyteller. Now, I'm sure you noticed that what I've done, in addition to giving you the origin as French, is I've given you a little bit of the word's history. I said, for example, bon mot means good word. Faux pas means false step. So I'm combining several of the methods that you've already learned. I've given you now what things mean and their origin to help you remember them more easily. Let's take a look at Spanish now. Now what I'd like you to do is to pause the program and match each word that entered English from Spanish with its definition. Then come back. An armada is a fleet of warships. Embargo is to restrict commerce, to cut off trade. Flotilla is a group of ships. Now, number 4 looks like it should be junta, but it's pronounced junta. And I've forgotten my Spanish, so I have to keep remembering that this has a Spanish pronunciation. The J is an H. Junta is a ruling group. Presidio is a fort or a garrison town. Guerrilla is an independent soldier, a soldier who works on his or her own. Adobe is a type of sun-dried brick that you may have seen in pictures or in person. Canyon is a valley with very, very steep sides. Sierra is a chain of hills or mountains. And bravado is bluster. Let's take a look at Italian. Now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and match each word that entered English from Italian with its definition. Then come back. An arcade is an arched passageway or a group of shops. A catacomb is a tomb. Cornice is the molding that you may see around doors or on ceilings. A grotto is a cave. Mezzanine is the lowest balcony. You may know that from theater. A citadel is a fortress. A vendetta is a private feud people have. A carat is a unit of weight in gemstones. Now, you probably have heard other carats. It's a sort of common, interesting word. Carat with a K, K-A-R-A-T, is a measure for gold, like 14 carat or 24 carat. Carrot, C-A-R-R-O-T, is the orange vegetable, the one that, we chew on. And C-A-R-E-T, also pronounced carrot, is a proofreader's mark for inserting. That carrot looks like a little upside-down V. Parmesan is a cheese. We often sprinkle it on our spaghetti. And mercantile is pertaining to trade. Now, you may be wondering why I'm saying things like Parmesan, we often sprinkle it on spaghetti. I'm trying to give you a hook to hang the word on. And earlier I had mentioned knowing roots, suffixes, prefixes, knowing a word's history. If you can link the word to something, maybe you link Parmesan to spaghetti, that'll help you remember the word and use it correctly. So all the little things I'm saying on the side, they are to help you remember the words and use them right. I mentioned earlier that English has taken words from many other languages, other than French and Spanish and, Italian. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and match each word that entered English from a Native American, Asian, or Middle Eastern language, or some other language, with its definition. Then come back. Saffron is a yellow-orange spice, or it's that beautiful yellow-orange color. The word comes from Arabic. Saffron is a delicious spice, and it's a very, very expensive spice because it comes from the inside of crocus flowers, so it's very hard to gather. To garble means to mix up, and that's an Arabic word. The word garble sounds like mix up. It sounds like the letters or garble are getting caught in your mouth. That's a good way to remember it. Clan is a group of families. That comes from Gaelic. Karaoke is a sing-along recreational activity. The word comes from Japanese. Alchemy is a type of magic, and it comes from Arabic. Karma, which means your fate, is a Sanskrit word. Kumquat, isn't that a great word? Kumquat is an orange fruit. It's Chinese. A kumquat is very small, and they're normally served in this country and preserved, like you get them in a jar and they come in a little bit of liquid. Guru is a wise leader. It's a Hindi word. A pundit is an expert or an authority. That's also a Hindi word. And sequoia is a very, very tall tree. It's a Native American word. The sequoias are in California. You know it's important to improve your vocabulary to improve your writing. There are many ways to learn useful words. You can play word games, you can read widely, you can use context clues, you can learn the history of a word, you can use word cards, carry them, take them with you. You can learn synonyms and antonyms for words. You can use reference books, such as dictionaries and thesauruses, and learn connotations as well as denotations. Learning affixes, those are prefixes, suffixes, and roots, gives you the skills to decode many new words and to use them properly in your speech and your writing. Knowing words that have entered English from other languages also helps you express yourself with precision and with style. Well, we've come to the end of our program. I hope that you found this instruction helpful and that you've learned some things that you can use to take your written communication to the next level. Be sure to join us in the next program in Video-Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series, Avoiding Common Mistakes, where you'll learn how to polish your writing and make it error-free. Thanks for watching.
When you're serious about learning an academic subject or scoring high in a test, there's just one name to know: Video-Aided Instruction. We don't waste your time with goofy skits, corny jokes, or silly sing-alongs. We get right to the point. Real teaching by real teachers. Visit us online at videoaidedinstruction.com to learn more about our exciting line of educational programs. As we say here at Video-Aided Instruction, press play to learn.
Do you want to earn better grades in school or boost your scores on standardized tests? Do you want to increase your fluency in English or improve your communication skills at work? Or do you simply want to relearn those forgotten grammar rules? Well, look no further. Video-Aided Instructions English Grammar Series is a great resource for everyone, whether you're new to English or you've been speaking it for years. Our one-of-a-kind series can help you master even the most complicated grammar topics. Be sure to view the entire series: English grammar sentence structure, parts of speech, sentence complements, verbs, pronouns, agreement, modifiers, parallel structure, punctuation, and spelling and capitalization. So don't let mistakes in English grammar embarrass you or hold you back. Let Video-Aided Instruction help you eliminate them from your speaking and writing forever. If you're getting ready to take your SAT, don't forget, your score can make or break your chances of getting into the college of your dreams. That's where Video-Aided Instructions SAT Series, a complete SAT course on DVD, can make all the difference. Our comprehensive SAT series will help you prepare thoroughly with insider strategies for making sense of tough reading passages and sentence completions, mastering the tricky rules of grammar, usage, and mechanics, crafting a well-written, high-scoring essay, unraveling those mind-boggling math problems, avoiding lengthy computations by using proven shortcuts, and much more. Get that all-important edge over the competition with SAT Critical Reading, SAT Writing, and SAT Math. After viewing these exceptional programs, you'll be able to take the stress out of SAT success and maximize your score.